Earlier, I spoke to Professor Alan Dershowitz about the defamation case that is now being taken against CNN and Christiane Amanpour. Let's take a listen. So for more, we now welcome Professor Alan Dershowitz, Professor Emeritus at the Harvard Law School, joining us from Miami. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on this day. So CNN's Christiane Amanpour called this attack in the Jordan Valley in April a shootout, suggesting there was an exchange of gunfire. I understand you are taking on this case. Why?
I am taking on this case pro bono because this is part of a pattern that CNN and Amanpour have engaged in over a decade or more than a decade. Amanpour constantly creates a moral equivalence between terrorists who murder people in cold blood and innocent victims, like the three innocent victims in this case. This was not a slip of the tongue. This was not an honest mistake. An organization called Camera, which documents these kinds of things, has documented a long pattern by CNN and by Amanpour of constantly siding against Israel and trying to create a moral equivalence between innocent victims of terrorism and actual terrorism. So she meant it when she said it, when she misled the world public by saying this was a shootout, suggesting that these innocent kids who were murdered in cold blood somehow were shooting at terrorists. No, she can't get away with that. And remember that the people who were involved are not public figures, so malice doesn't have to be proved. All that has to be proved is that the family suffered emotional distress, emotional harm, and we will be able to prove that. The harm that was suffered from this horrible statement by Amanpour, for which she tried to privately apologize and then was forced to make a kind of weak public apology, will become the subject of a significant lawsuit against CNN.
And to that exact point, CNN's Christiane Amanpour did address this on her show on Monday, saying she misspoke and that she had written to Rabbi Dee to make sure that they apologize for any further pain that may have caused him. Talk to us about how this may change the case, if at all, given that there would be an argument that an apology of sorts was made publicly.
Apology is not enough. The private apology was written just to the person, and then she was forced to make the kind of mealy-mouthed public apology. She hasn't apologized for years and years and years of misleading the world about the Israel-Palestine conflict and about terrorism. They suffered enormous harm. You can't take that back. An apology doesn't undo a defamation. This was a defamation. We are exploring this. A group of lawyers, we're all doing this pro bono because these people suffered enough, and they didn't have to have additional suffering imposed on them by creating a sense in the world that these were just combatants that were fighting each other, and tragically they were killed. No, that's not what happened. And Amanpour has made these mistakes over and over again, and they always favor one side. I challenge her to show me one mistake, one misstatement she made that has ever favored the victims of terrorism rather than the terrorists themselves. Shame on her, and I can't wait until she's under deposition to go back to her whole history of making these kinds of, quote, mistakes. They're not mistakes. They're part of a deliberate pattern of trying to create a moral equivalence of events in which there is no moral equivalence. There's no moral equivalence between people who shoot families in cold blood and the people who were suffering as the result of simply being victims of terrorism. So let's wait to hear what Amanpour says, not in a scripted apology, but under my cross-examination and the cross-examination of other lawyers.
Professor, initial reports suggest that this lawsuit would be for $1.3 billion. Can you confirm, first of all, that is the case? And secondly, how do you get to that particular amount?
I didn't come up with that particular amount. We are exploring all the options, where to bring the lawsuit, what the nature of the lawsuit is, whether it be defamation or emotional distress. We're in the exploratory process. I am, however, absolutely committed to bringing Amanpour to justice and to putting her into cross-examination and to making her justify not only what she said in this case, which hurt these people terribly, but her pattern of constantly creating a false moral equation between terrorists and their victims. So let's see where we go from here, but we're ready to proceed.
We certainly will be watching to see exactly how things unfold. Speaking to us from Miami, Professor Alan Dershowitz, Professor Emeritus at Harvard Law School, thank you for your time.
Thank you.